Well, good morning, everybody. To get us started today, I wanted to show you what the flow is going to look like by Saturday for much here of North America, getting over toward the Arctic. And you can even see parts of Russia here. And that's an important part of this because the flow on Saturday, if we kind of trace it here, it comes cross-polar all the way down through the Canadian Prairie into the northern plains of the United States. And this is going to send a quick shortwave today through the Great Lakes. It's going to head toward New England. And then as that cold air pushes up against the Rocky Mountains, we're going to watch on Saturday for a weak low to form right in this particular area. And that's going to spread some snow through the central United States after putting down some snow throughout like Montana, Wyoming, and parts of the northern plains. Now, one of the things we'll be discussing a lot, again, in this video is just the presence of this subtropical ridge and its longevity, because it's going to really fuel quite a bit of very wet weather across parts of the south and southeast and mid-south. But that low, as it treks across, will be spreading some snow, and that's one of the reasons why we've now seen the increased area from previously where the winter storm watches and warnings were throughout Montana, Wyoming, and parts of Idaho, to now include this region in through here, South Dakota, northern Nebraska, into Iowa. Like there's a winter storm warning out right in through this area now. Still through the Red River Valley, winter weather advisory, and we can see here the strong winds that are following the system. There's also going to be some strong winds throughout the Ohio Valley down here as well. But as we talked about, a lot of flooding risk down here across parts of the south into the southeast as we move forward in this pattern. So let's kind of break it down just by going right to the high-res NAM, one of my kind of favorite near-term models. We can see that this morning the low has moved out of the Red River Valley, but still some blowing snow on the back side of this and moves over Lake Superior. So this spreads some snow through Wisconsin into Michigan and possibly some rain, very cold rain into Illinois and central Indiana with snow farther to the north. And as that low kind of exits through Ontario and sweeps into parts of Quebec, this is where the Arctic front begins to push down late tonight. And there's the low we just talked about we saw in the flow of the mid-levels of the low levels of the atmosphere. Okay, so let's pick up on Saturday morning and play through Saturday evening. That's Saturday morning through the evening. We do start to see that there's better chances for scattered rain to the south of this as this flow comes around this larger ridge here and pulls right up into parts of Missouri and Illinois, and some snow to the north of it. And that's why we've got that winter weather situation setting up right in through this region. But what this is really just showing us is that the setup going forward may look like this quite a bit over the coming days. And what you've got is you've got a large high pressure cell coming in like this. There's still one that sits off of the southeast like that. And in the middle, we just get rain to freezing rain to snow. That's going to be the setup, I think, for a lot of the systems that are coming through here in the coming days. Before we kind of deal with that and talk about it, though, I want to show you the latest weekend totals here for snow. Let's start off first with the heavier snows we're expecting in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, even parts of Utah and Colorado, northern Colorado. And some of the mountains here could pick up to 20 inches of snow, but there's going to be a really sharp divide right here through parts of Montana where we see the better snows to the south of this line. Then getting over here, let's take a look a little bit farther to the east as the snow spreads parts of South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois. Again, another very sharp delineation on both sides of this as to where the heavier snow band will be, but there's a good 3 to 5 inch band in this area with maybe some heavier snow right in through this sector here. Now after this, it's going to be all about the jet stream flow, which again for most of the next 7 to 10 days, can't get the jet to really push all the way to the west. It's very weak flow here. Do you see how it's broken and split? There's a broader trough that sits over the Hudson Bay, so that's this piece, and the subtropical component runs around this ridge. And that's it. We're going to see a lot of that pattern going forward, which gives us this 10-day outlook on precipitation anomalies. European model stayed very consistent with this going into this morning's run. So we're kind of sandwiching a few things here. This is the precip coming in right now. Okay, this is what we're going to be watching over the weekend and the clipper that runs to the north of it. But there'll be a dry swath to the south of this. You can see right in through here, very dry air overall. And then you get south of that line, and this is where things just continue to pick up. The West Coast overall, I'll show you the newest data for February into early March. I don't know how soon it will be until we can kind of correct the lack of good flow coming off the Pacific. And this area may be more dry throughout the month of February than originally anticipated until we see some better evidence of that changing. But let's go to our multi-model analysis and show you, I think, one of the bigger threats in terms of weather next week. So GFS left, European right. Now the models are kind of in pretty good agreement with the system coming through this weekend. See that? That's what you've already seen with the high-res NAM. But what we'll be watching is going into early next week, by early Monday morning, both models have the heavier rains over the southeast. But this is the system that they don't necessarily agree on. You see, the GFS versus the European. The GFS does not have this ice event that's on the backside where the European does. And the European's been very consistent with having it, and the GFS has been very consistent with not having it. The pattern is more progressive in the GFS. The trough is farther east. And as a result, you can see, I mean, look at the ice that's expected next, Monday night into Tuesday into this region, and it's just nowhere to be found in the GFS. Now we play this forward, and there's a reinforcing wave that once again the GFS is wetter east, bigger high coming in. The European doesn't have it. So the result is this system lingers farther back to the west and does, possibly more ice out of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, this whole region. And as we just play out there for a full week, the model differences are stark with this next system coming through. So let's do a quick comparison. Over the next 7 days, this is where the European model is putting down ice. All right. Now we're going to use this as guidance. Don't look at it at amounts. It's just where we're seeing the potential for ice, for a freezing rain event. The Canadian model is even more aggressive on a much larger area. So again, European model, Canadian model, and here's the GFS. All three of these are the 0Z runs. I just want to point out the differences right now because that adds uncertainty into next week. Now, you know that I tend to side with the European model purely based on statistics, but we're going to have to watch this next week because the potential is there for ice in the Mid-South into the Southern Plains. From here, I'm going to talk about snow. This is the chance of getting at least 3 inches over the next 10 days. So you notice that the pattern, while cold, is not setting up for any major snowstorms across the country, save what we're going to be watching over the next 48 to 60 hours. The lake effect that follows that, and some heavier snows into parts of Ontario, Quebec, and the northern tier of the northeast United States. But the heaviest rains will be from eastern Texas into the Mid-South, Tennessee Valley, and the southeast. With this next system coming through, while we do see better chances of some coastal precip here in like the I-5 corridor, the west still is suffering from that split flow. Now the temperature pattern is going to be one to watch, and we're going to try to give a timeline on when the cold air arrives and when it exits. Already we've seen the models trend colder in the northern plains today, with highs in the teens here, but as we go from there into Saturday, high temperatures will struggle to get above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and the cold air continues to press. Look at this, right up against the Rocky Mountains. Sunday's high temperatures struggling to get above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, so that's up to almost 40 degrees colder than normal. We then see there's Monday's high temperatures compared to normal getting into Tuesday, but as we work our way toward kind of that famous meteorological holiday, Groundhog's Day, we're already starting to see some moderation as the pattern flattens back out. The trough sends itself kind of farther to the east over toward Greenland, and the cold air goes with it. So that kind of gives us an end date on this about a week from now in terms of the extent of the really cold air. And the latest European Ensemble sees the same thing. So you see the cold air diving through, but through that first week of February, moderation begins. And I think we're going to see this pattern in February do one of these like week on, week off type things where we get a highly variable Pacific jet that leads to some cold air, and then it's followed by mild air, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And to be honest, there's a lot of Februaries that are like that. To finish this up, I do want to just tell you, get a chance to read the report. I stress again, and I put this in last night's in-depth video, underlaying a lot of that snow, we still have some long-standing drought issues, and we also talk about the newest drought monitor and some of the changes with it. And also we do another discussion about the European weeklies and what this might mean going forward, especially for the West, which has really just kind of shut off the precipitation as of late. And finally in the report, we do talk about what's going on in South America. I'm a bit surprised at the slow harvest progress in Mato Grosso. We'll get new numbers out today. I link where you can go find those in today's report. But it's still forecast to be relatively dry compared to normal. So there's still precip here, but just drier than normal across the north. Very wet in the central United States, in central Brazil. Going to push the crop even bigger. Models trended drier for southern Rio Grande do Sul and Uruguay, but still keep decent moisture in parts of north central Argentina. The drier signal in Buenos Aires is not something I'm overly concerned about, given that this area has seen a pretty dramatic improvement overall due to recent rains, and it's going to be cooler during this time period. So that's a brief update on South America. Hey, have a great weekend, and we'll talk again on Monday. Thanks.